Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session here on Thursday, the 23rd of July. My name is Tavita Lasuma, GM of Student Engagement. I'm here along with my colleague, Dr. Natasha Abrahams, who's our Senior Policy Coordinator, and we're here to help facilitate discussion around placement issues related to COVID-19, especially the recent restrictions that have come into play. And we're extremely excited and grateful to have guests on behalf of the areas that are providing placements for postgraduate students here at University of Melbourne. But before I get into it, I'd like to acknowledge the land of the Yakult Wallang clan of the Burrarong, where I'm actually currently hosting from today. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and recognise the strength, resilience and capacity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this land. So as I mentioned, Tavita Lasuma, GM for Student Engagement, and this is part of a series of town halls or discussions that we're going to put together to be able to get some insights into some of the issues that students are facing in relation to placements, especially for this session. Now, the reason we put these together is because we have been getting some correspondence and some chatter from our students to say, look, there are issues that they're facing now because they've either had a placement set up and it's been cancelled or deferred, obviously for the reasons mentioned earlier, or or they're on a placement and they're feeling the sort of the angst about how that's going to affect their studies moving forward, because obviously placements is a large part of the learning factor of their studies. So I'd like to sort of co-host this session with my colleague Natasha, and so we have 4 different faculty areas that are guests today. And so I'd like to firstly start with social work. So we're very lucky to have both Judy Brewster and Jennifer McConaughey in. So before I start, Judy has worked in the social work placement coordinator in the Department of Social Work for the past 3 years. Prior to this, she has worked in social work, health promotion, public health roles spanning correctional, aged care, health and disability settings. She has a Bachelor of Social Work and a Master of Public Health. To accompany Judy, we have Jennifer, who is currently the Academic Specialist in Field Education and is a Field Education Coordinator in the Department of Social Work at the University of Melbourne. Jennifer has been a social worker for over 30 years and has worked in tertiary education for over 7 at the Universities of Melbourne, Monash and La Trobe. Her interest in building sustainable partnerships with providers and meaningful placements for students. She was also part of a team working to reconfigure placements prompted by COVID-19 conditions and to revise field education assessments. So please welcome Judy and Jennifer. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the call. And it is a tough time for students and also especially the university, because it's hard. We don't actually plan for this sort of stuff. I don't think anyone does really, but plan for these sort of situations. And I might throw it out to maybe you first, Judy, if you can, just to talk us through what the situation is coming out of this, your area.
Sure, thanks, Tavita. I guess the issues that we're facing are, I guess, cover a number of areas. One is supply, that our agencies, whilst many of them are being incredibly flexible, a number of our agencies have halved the number of placements, particularly in direct practice in hospitals, which is where we traditionally place first placement students. And then alongside of that is that we're not the only provider looking for placements out in the marketplace. It's an incredibly crowded marketplace with, particularly unis like Monash that have a large student cohort. So for COVID-19 to come in basically during our usual placement period, which is May to August, it's been incredibly challenging. And once we had our initial lockdown and it was a requirement of the uni, the faculty asked us to suspend not only all placements but all placement planning. So once we were given the green light to commence, we've sent students out in cohorts now, smaller cohorts, in June, and another group in July, and we'll send out another group end of August and another group in October. Some of the solutions that we've been working with, agencies have been incredibly flexible in that they have offered virtual placements. Some have continued to offer face-to-face, but the AASW has allowed us to modify our requirements to have shorter placements, to have virtual placements or a mix. We've been able to do project placements, and we've also been able to have flexible virtual supervision and liaison. And our students have been incredibly resilient and demonstrated their own flexibility in coming along with these changes, and we've been very grateful for that. But we're not immune to the fact that there have been challenges. Yeah. So keen to hear what students have got to say.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. Appreciate it. And Jennifer, anything else to add there? I guess just reading your bio, I think you know part of your remit is to sort of almost redesign for the COVID-19 situation. So, did you have anything else to add?
I think, thanks, Davida, the only sorts of things that I would say is we're trying to scaffold around placements. So rather than seeing field education as just being people's time on placement, we're adding tasks for students to do before they go out, as well as things after they've completed their placement, to try and really consolidate their experience. One of the things that the international as well as national social work bodies have decided is that our placements should be shorter. So generally we have 14-week placements, which is very long, really, in comparison to almost every other allied health. So some of those have nearly halved. And so we're aware that the students aren't getting the sort of exposure that they would usually get. So we're trying to scaffold around that. We have tutors that visit them on placement, which is a standard procedure, but we've added an additional visit to that. And I suppose the only other thing is just there are practicalities, and everybody will be struggling with this. So while we are a practice-based profession, as most allied health are, and we want people to do face-to-face if possible, we're really aware that those face-to-face direct placements are the ones that are most at risk. You know, the minute that there's a lockdown, there are places that don't open. There are staff that are struggling with how do they do online for themselves, and they feel they can't give students a really good experience. Pragmatics of if they do go into the office, it's only every second desk that you can sit in. So trying to juggle all of those, and literally for some places that's changing week to week. And so the students I know are left hanging because of all of this toing and froing. So we're very aware of it. So yeah, I guess there's some of the alternatives.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Look, I know we've got some questions pushing through, and I might park these for a second and get some more information from the rest of the team on the panelists before we go back. So I'm just conscious of the time. So everyone on the call, the questions, we've seen them. We're definitely going to get to them. I just want to hear from the staff here on the panel just quickly. So I might move it over to Natasha to introduce our next group.
So thank you, Tavita. So we're really fortunate today to have two industry placement coordinators from the School of Engineering. We have Tracy Skordos, who's currently working at the Melbourne School of Engineering and previously was an industry consultant in the Faculty of Business and Economics. Tracy has extensive experience in the education sector and primarily in the work integrated learning space. We are also fortunate to have Louisa Tobin. Louisa is also an industry placement coordinator in the Melbourne School of Engineering. And since 2015, Louisa has worked on the development of the engineering and IT internship subject, firstly on her own and more recently with some additional colleagues. And she's grown that subject from a small pilot program with 7 students to its successful current format with over 380 students enrolled yearly. And Louisa also has a strong background in international education, student mobility and employability, in both the UK and Australia. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Tracy and Louisa. I'll first hand over to Tracy to tell us a bit about the placement issues in the Melbourne School of Engineering.
So much, Natasha. So we thought it would be a very challenging semester for us, but it has actually been okay. I think we kind of hit the ground running. We're really fortunate in that we've got a team of 5 of us working in the internship space. So our first kind of initiative was to reach out to our employers and find out how many of them were willing to accept students working for them remotely. So once we kind of established those numbers, we were able to communicate that to our students. And so in terms of semester 1, it was very much business as usual, with a few students working remotely, but definitely for semester 2, we have seen a small drop in our numbers, about 20%, but overall employers have been very willing to accept students working from home, and so we've been working very closely with them for semester 2. Going forward for summer intake, we're just working on our comms at the moment to communicate the same message, but all in all, students have been happy to undertake an internship, whatever that may look like. So I suppose we've been very fortunate that both students and employers have come to the party, and everyone's working very collaboratively. So no issues as such, as we've heard from other faculties.
Thank you, Tracy. That's wonderful to hear. And Louisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, hi everybody. I would add that I think engineering and IT are probably, particularly in the, excuse me, on the IT side, we're probably relatively fortunate compared to disciplines such as social work, such as healthcare, where a lot of what our students are doing can be done remotely much more easily. So that's definitely something that has played in our favor. Also, our internship is not compulsory. So I can see a couple of questions from the attendees saying, you know, can courses be extended to accommodate postponed placements? While we encourage all of our students to take an internship, and it's really important to us that all of our students do get access to industry experience, it's not compulsory. So we are, I guess, lucky in that sense that we don't need to extend degrees or have students worried about having to extend degrees in order to fit in their placement. But we, as Tracy has said, we have been very lucky that the host companies that we work with have really gone above and beyond, and our students have also exhibited a great degree of flexibility in adapting to the online workplace, which I think has been a feature of all our lives. But for engineering and IT, I think the situation, it's been stressful, it's been busy, but it could have been a lot worse.
Thank you. Sounds like wonderful things are happening for engineering and IT.
Yeah, I think as well, the other thing that we've really been trying to do is to embrace the opportunity that this has presented to us. And while it didn't initially feel like any sort of opportunity at all, we're now looking into being able to, continue with remote internships after COVID-19 has ended. It's not something we had considered before, but it's certainly something that will become part of our offering now, both for our domestic students, both for our students taking internships here in Australia, but also for students who want to take internships for an overseas company. It's prompted us to introduce a much broader range of, I guess, flexible options for students in how they undertake our internship subject. So if there's any positive to come from COVID-19, that might be it.
Thank you, Louisa. I'll now hand back to Vita to introduce our next panelist.
Thanks, Natasha. So I've got 2 guests here from MGSE. So education, we have Dr. Daniela Aquaro, if I'm saying that correctly, apologies if I'm not, is the Program Director of Initial Teacher Education within the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, providing oversight of a suite of Master of Teaching courses, including early childhood, primary and secondary. With Daniela, we have Guinevere Jordan, who is the Senior Manager of Student Experience within the Melbourne Graduate School of Education. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to jump on the call. And I think yes, we just heard from engineering and IT, and that there is some positives coming out of their group because of the ability for them to be virtual in a sense. Whereas I guess on the flip side, when we talk about social work and education, it's a bit more challenging. Can I get some comments from you, Daniela?
Well, it's, I suppose we find ourselves in a very similar situation to social work and the healthcare area. We really are at the mercy of our schools and our early childhood and care centres, and ultimately school closures and centre closures for a short period really meant that placements weren't possible. I think and so what we've been trying to do really is work with a number of stakeholders and trying to determine what is possible, when it's possible, and ultimately wait for schools and centres to determine whether or not we are able to continue on with placements. So many placements have been organised, had been organised for a very, very long time. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that a number of our centres and schools have decided to cancel those placements. Now, the University of Melbourne is not in a situation like this on its own. All universities are meeting weekly and in many cases, and sometimes daily, to actually talk about these placement issues. So there is a lot that's happening behind the scenes. All universities are experiencing the same, and ultimately the larger universities where we have got larger numbers are struggling more so. So, you know, some universities are finding, you know, they have a cohort of 30 or 50, and so they can manage to get those students placed. Obviously, we have a much larger cohort, and so there are a number of challenges, and we are very, very well aware of the challenges. We're very well aware of the anxiety that's being felt. We have actually tried to give a great deal of flexibility in terms of completing placement. So we have, for the first time, really offered the choice to students about whether or not they feel comfortable going into placement at a particular time. And some students have decided, particularly the first year students, have decided just to delay because obviously they have next year where they could potentially catch up. In saying that, the VIT, who is our accrediting body, the Victorian Institute of Teaching, has also decreased the number of compulsory days, as has a CEQA, who looks over the early childhood space. So that's where some of our students will be seeing a reduction of days. And you know, there is quite a push to actually take up those reductions. I wonder whether Genevieve has anything else to add. I mean, there's a lot to say in this space, so I'm sure that we will unpack a number of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there is a lot to say and there's a lot going on. I think it is fair to say, though, that we're trying our best to be particularly flexible and understanding of the different situations that our many students face. So that means, as Daniela mentioned, in some cases, students aren't in a position to do a placement at the moment, and we are accommodating that. In other situations, we've got schools or early childhood settings who had previously agreed to take a placement who are no longer now in a position to do so. So we're looking to reschedule those. We are finding it quite a challenge.
Yeah, no,
it's quite a challenge to answer queries. We encourage students to contact us with queries. We can address those. And at this stage, for mid-year, we certainly were able to place all of our students.
So all the students that needed to complete, I think Genevieve's cutting in and out. So we have some of our students, our secondary students in particular, were due for completion. So they were doing an accelerated mode. And we managed to place all of those students who needed to have those placements. Some of those students elected to push back placements. We clearly have another group that we are prioritising. So all students that need to graduate by the end of the year really have become our priority. And first year students, we are hoping that we can catch up on placements for them when we can. So it may feel for students that we are constantly changing placement days. We are working with schools and centres and hoping that we can get those placements in, but quite often finding that schools and centres are saying, sorry, we've changed our mind, we can't accept students, and that might happen a few days before. And so we're trying to be as agile as we can, but on the receiving end, that may feel like a great level of disorganisation. And I can assure you that all faculties that are dealing with placements, you know, we are meeting, this is the #1 priority. This has taken over everything that we do. And so we just do the very best that we can with the information that's coming through. And that's really where we sort of sit at the moment.
Yeah, look, thanks for I guess stating that too. I guess in most situations it's hard to see from where people are standing, and I guess it's just it's good to understand that it is a #1 priority, and I wouldn't have think it wasn't, but I think it's nice to talk about it. We do have a couple of questions that are directed to MGSC. So I don't know whether you wanted to tackle any of these,
Sure.
Daniela or Genevieve. So look, the first one is just for one of the students in the room is, you know, Masters of Teaching Secondary first-year students believe that they should not be graded on their first placement. They're aware of how much this grade might come to affect the semester average, and due to the possibilities of CTP1 completion varying immensely between student to student, it doesn't make sense that such a subject over which students have had no influence over the changes that have occurred should come to impact the grades of their subjects. So, I mean, is there any comments on that particular? I guess it's more of a statement.
Do you want to talk about the academic aspects, and then perhaps I can add
yes.
How WAMs are being treated?
Yes, absolutely. So the difficulty and I suppose the challenge with that particular placement was that halfway through that placement, schools closed, and effectively placements had to come to a stop. And the Department of Education, you know, all communication to universities was no placements. And so that really sort of put us in quite a situation. It is difficult to actually, we have thought about, have students completed enough placement days to actually assess. And the decision was that we would actually offer an additional set of days so that that placement could be continued. We think that there is a lot of value in actually getting back into this space, as we heard from of engineering, so that we can actually think about what it means to be teaching in this space. We don't know how long we're going to be here. We don't know what it's going to look like in the future. And so for us, the priority is to get back in and complete that first placement. So we really aren't considering this as a you know, non-completion of placement where we would then be considering that it shouldn't be graded. For us, the placement should really be completed. Where that becomes impossible, then we will look at other possibilities. But at the moment, we are fully focused on trying to get placement days completed for all placements.
Thanks, Danielle. Genevieve, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, we're also very mindful that students are concerned about their marks and their grades, and also their weighted average mark. Hopefully you're all aware that some amendments to the calculations of WAM, so the weighted average mark, have been already made for semester 1, and there's a possibility that these will be extended into semester 2. And what that means for students, including in this placement subject that we're talking about, is that if students get a grade that is not equal to or higher than their previous WAM, it won't actually be counted. So that means that you won't be disadvantaged by the COVID situation. So I think, you know, we're hopeful that that will enable students to feel that they're not being disadvantaged by the situation, and that their interests are really being looked after in this particular circumstance.
Right, thanks, John. We actually have another question directed to MGSE. I think I'll knock this one out so we can come back to the group and introduce a few others in the room, so we can keep it going, because I'm conscious of time always. So here we go. So Master of Teaching Secondary first year, why did we have the students turning up to their placement schools on Monday whose mentor teachers were still not aware of the TCs, that their TCs were attending placement? The 2021 cohort is now a position where 1 in 4 students are able to complete placement due to schools feeling ill-equipped at times, and were not advised with enough time or have not been able to prepare. It seems that many schools have had no correspondence with MGSE since March, April. We believe the schools should have been advised of schedule change in May, or at least an update in June regarding future plans while it's going. So it's basically a communication question, and whether it's you, Danielle, or Guinevere, please, who would like to address that one?
Yeah, maybe I can go first, and Danielle, you might like to add. On very rare occasions, but it does happen occasionally, that we have a mentor teacher who's changed for some reason during a break. So as Daniela mentioned, we had a period when schools were closed and working remotely. We have had extended school holidays, so as well as university changes to dates. Of course, schools have had changes to dates as well. So sometimes within a school, there are new arrangements, there are staffing changes, and occasionally that means, unfortunately, that there is a communication breakdown. We try and reduce that by having good, regular, sometimes quite frequent communication with schools. So if there are any issues like that, we're really working hard to ameliorate it. I guess we are mindful too that we're talking about a cohort of nearly 1,300 students. So there are many, many people involved in this. When you think about every student who goes on placement is liaising with a student teacher coordinator in a school, has a mentor teacher in a school, has academic staff supporting them in the form of a clinical teaching specialist, a clinical teaching practice coordinator, and so on. There are sizable numbers of people that we are talking about, and occasionally, unfortunately, sometimes there are breakdowns in communication for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes there are changes at the school end. Sometimes there are students who are changing their plans, particularly at the moment. We've got students who, for a whole host of reasons, may no longer be able to go on placement. And sometimes, unfortunately, amid all of that, yes, there are errors at MGSE's end. So we're really working, absolutely paddling really hard to try and reduce the incidence of those things. But we absolutely agree that it's critical to have the communication really absolutely honed. We've been working very closely with schools during this period when we can. So understanding, again, as Daniela has said, there have been periods of time when it's been really uncertain what we've been able to do and how we've been able to move forward in this current environment. So there have been times when, for example, early childhood settings have not been able to accept placements at all, a blanket no to that. And so that means we can give people an update, but then there's sort of a bit of a period of time where there's not a whole lot more to say until there is a change. And likewise with schools, of course.
Same sort of situation.
Very significant changes to operations and policy settings and so on. So there've been, and sometimes a flurry of communication changes, happening in quick succession that we've been trying to manage. And other times, periods of time, not too long, hopefully, but sometimes a period where there's really not been much change, and we're really just waiting for that next piece of advice, particularly when we're talking about government requirements that really flow through to all of what we do. So, there's some big challenges there for sure.
Thanks, Genevieve. Danielle, do you have anything to add?
Listen, I think Genevieve's pretty much covered it, and I would say that we're all in the same sorts of situations. We have a placement office. The placement office sends out communications to schools. We have, placement coordinators, our clinical teaching coordinators, and they are communicating with our students. There is a lot of anxiety out in schools. Many, many teachers are very, very anxious. There is a lot of pressure on them. They are anxious human beings also in all of this, and they are being required to go into schools and continue to work where many other people have an option to work from home. And so I think first and foremost, we really need to understand the position that they find themselves in. They ultimately are doing us a favour as in terms of hosting. So regardless of what the placement is, industry, schools, hospitals, they are doing us a favour. And so we really need to approach placement with that in mind and with a level of understanding, particularly at this time. Our anxieties are high, their anxieties are high. So if we try and approach the situation as best we can, and I don't mean to sort of sound patronising, but we just have to do the best that we can. And where we have students that really have been turned back from schools or centres where they had expected, an email to the course coordinator or to the CTP coordinator, and we will help you get to the bottom of it. Well, we won't help you get to the bottom of it, we will get to the bottom of it. So that is the best way of managing this, rather than really, you know, sort of holding, you know, the level of stress or anger. I just don't think it's helpful at the moment.
All right, yeah, thanks, Daniela, and thank you, Gwen. Yeah, really appreciate your comments to the questions and the situation. So I might give Natasha an opportunity to introduce our next guest. Natasha, over to you.
Thank you. So we're fortunate to have one more faculty representative here today. We have David Rogers, who is the Manager of Careers and Industry for the Faculty of Science. So his role is to curate internships and research projects with industry partners, providing opportunities for science students to build and enhance their competencies to increase their employability. And David has significant experience in global biotech and software companies in leadership development, HR and IT, in addition to academic advising of college students. Over to you, David, to tell us a bit about internships in science.
Thank you, Natasha. And so in science, we have two programs that we kind of focus on with my team. One is internships and one is with industry projects. The internships are optional, so they're not required, where the industry projects are part of a capstone requirement for master's programs in data science, biotech, and environmental science. So those are definitely requirements for graduation. I'm going to focus on the internships. So those are all, like I said, optional, and the students source themselves on most of those opportunities. And so beginning of the semester, semester one, right when we kicked off the semester, then we went into lockdown. I contacted our intern host just to touch base and provide some options for them, as well as just kind of see what support they would need, if possible, to move these internships online. And about 80% of the internship, over 80% of the internships, the hosts were able to continue with their internship. By that point in time, some of them had already made plans to move their intern from home, provided laptops and network access, and we're already well on the way to make that happen, which is great to see that they're able to pivot. And I say the most overused word right now is pivot, is able to make those change and to accommodate the interns as just one of their staff members. The interns that the hosts that were unable to accommodate and had to actually terminate the internship early were ones that required in science laboratory access, or in environmental science, some of those had field work components that, as part of the intern, the scope of the project, that they had to have access to those going forward. And so as a result, they had to stop those. There's no option really to allow the physical distance, as well as in a laboratory or in the field work, and just couldn't get access to a specific facility. And so our subject coordinator was great to, if they completed a little over half of the work hours already by that point in time, she was able to allow them to continue if they wanted to get credit for the placement, or they could put it on hold until later to go back through and hopefully completed at some other point. And so they allowed some flexibility with that. With the industry projects, which are, like I said, required, they were, and ones that my team and I had sourced for those 3 master's programs, we were a little more concerned about those since it is a graduation requirement. And so we did a little more hand holding with those. But what's great also is these are biotech companies. These are in the data science kind of going with the, Lisa's comment of it's IT. They could do this work from basically anywhere. It's not just a work from home, it's work from anywhere for a lot of these. And so a lot of these are already organizations that have allowed some of their employees to already be virtual, already work remote. Some of them, were not so much about butts and seats anymore, but had allowed that flexibility. And so for them, it was easy to make that change. And kind of seeing the silver lining out of this is, I just joined the faculty in November of last year, coming from the States where I worked with biotech companies and worked remotely and had built great relationships when I was in the US with folks and staff in Singapore and the UK, and all via remote channels. And so I was advocating that we didn't have to have all of our industry hosts based in Melbourne. And some of the staff were like, no, we have to have this face-to-face component. Like, that's a key piece of this, is that face-to-face. I'm like, well, I couldn't get the win out of this. And so we focused again on Melbourne-based hosts. Well, I think it's kind of interesting now that as I've gone back through and touched base with all of our industry hosts, how's it going? What impact have you seen from a virtual standpoint on the project? And most of them are like, there's been no impact. One of them was even like, it's been great. Like, I don't like having people in my face all the time, and actually enjoying, building different connections. One did say that he was struggling with trying to explain some of the science behind the product that they're developing to the students. And he said, if I had the ability, I would love to have a big whiteboard and just bring them into a room and explain that. And so I think it's learning new ways of sharing content in a technological way. Sometimes the digital components haven't quite caught up, or people aren't quite as comfortable with those yet. So there's some challenges there, but for the most part, all the industry hosts, they all said, yes, we're moving forward with this, and they're all saying it's not a problem. And kind of the analogy that I've been using is, industry projects pre-COVID were apples. We had given them an apple. Here's what it is. It's a great piece of fruit. That's what you're going to get. This year, we're giving them an orange. It's a little different kind of fruit, but it's still a really good piece of fruit. And there's nothing wrong with it. And I think going forward, we're going to see a mix of, some apples, some oranges, some are diced up, and it's going to be a fruit salad of apples and oranges. And so I think for a lot of large companies, this is already the norm for a lot of them. It's forced us into a new way of thinking, and we're not going to go back, I feel like, completely. And I feel like have some justification for saying we don't have to be so Melbourne based in our thinking. We can be more global. And I think as a global leader in education, we need to embrace everything that's around all those great opportunities that are outside of Melbourne, and give students these global opportunities, and even cross-functional, between engineering and arts and education, and not just think within our faculty. And that's kind of one of my kind of focuses over the next couple of years here. So that's kind of where we are in science.
Thank you, David. It's really nice to hear about the new ways of working and how we can be international without leaving our home. I have one more panelist to introduce, which is a student representative. So we've heard a lot from different faculty staff members, and we're just going to quickly hear from Will Arnell, who is our student representative to the Clinical Placements Committee. And Will is also a physio student, and he has a particular interest in rural physiotherapy. So over to you, Will, to tell us a little bit about what placements have been like from the student perspective.
Yep, thanks, Natasha. So at the moment, obviously speaking on behalf of the MDHS is quite challenging in the sense that my last meeting with them was a few weeks ago, and as we know, a week's a long time in the COVID world these days. But I guess at the moment, some of the major things that students are really trying to get their heads around and grasp is dealing with the nature of getting sort of later notice in relation to placement allocations. due to the ever-changing situation surrounding the healthcare system within the MDHS. Unfortunately, from physiotherapy point of view, or not unfortunately, you know, say, for example, the elective surgeries just changed recently. So we want to know how that's going to affect our placement experience and the types of people we're going to see. But at the same time, it also challenges our flexibility. And I think one of the major patterns throughout today's meeting has been for the students to be flexible in the face of an ever-changing world, and accepting that a lot of what we're going to experience on placement isn't going to go away in the real world when we do graduate. So that's one major thing that we're going to have to contend with. But a key thing as well is that there are a lot of great opportunities for going rural placements for a lot of the MDHS. And unfortunately, at the moment with the Melbourne lockdown, it's really affected possible intake for opportunities for going rural placements all throughout Victoria. So those two things are probably the major considerations at the moment for what we have to consider with placements, how it affects our learning experience, but also thinking of alternate ways as well to stimulate our learning regardless of what cohort we're from. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Great. Look, thanks so much, Will, and the panelists are in the room. I've got a couple of questions I want to throw at you. I'm conscious of time, and everyone's time is precious, especially in these days. I'm sure there's a lot of meetings to get to try and work through these challenges for all our cohorts. So I might just throw one out there to maybe social work. There are a couple of questions here about what are some challenges that you anticipate for the semester 2, and is it possible to have soft skills or support for those students who are going to find it difficult from doing it online?
Yeah, thanks, Davina. We're anticipating a few different challenges in semester 2, in the sense that we're, particularly some of our agencies that are frontline service providers, we're anticipating some level of fatigue amongst placement supervisors who normally would be raring to go with supporting our placements. We're also anticipating that people will be forced to go on leave, which is exactly what's happening in the university, that anyone with leave is a financial liability for an organisation, and so we're already hearing that placement agencies are saying that they're going to be sending some of their staff on leave, so which will reduce the number of possible placements. Our other challenge is that we don't normally send our social work students out in semester 2, so therefore a lot of we work cooperatively with universities in the sector, so that RMIT and La Trobe and VU are often players in semester 2, whereas we're in the middle of the year. So sometimes we might approach agencies about possible placements, but we're always careful to say, look, we don't want to tread on other agencies' territory. If you're going to provide a placement, it shouldn't be at the cost of other universities, because they have been equally careful about not treading on our patch. So there's some of the challenges that we're likely to see. But having said that, we're really working hard to really work around those limitations. We are working up some placements that would be auspiced by our department but have real industry connections, that will be virtual and will not have such an emphasis on direct practice. They'll be research, have a research basis. But as far as the soft skills, we're planning on scaffolding those sorts of placements quite heavily. We'll be providing group supervision so that students can actually learn from each other. And there's we've really increased a peer possibility. We've got peer groups for every single student that goes out on placement is allocated to a peer group where they meet. They're asked to meet on a weekly basis so that they can share with each other not only how they're feeling, but also get a sense of what each other's placement experience is like, and to understand the sector and the settings. And I agree with the previous speaker in the sense that I think the world is going to change, and our students are going to need to be expected to be operating more with the telehealth systems and with virtual systems. And I think to see these placements as second rate is not necessarily accurate. I think we're actually all moving to be operating in a very different world. Did you want to add anything further, Jennifer?
I think the only thing that I'd say is that the way the department has approached this is that we usually teach in semester 2. This year we've taught in winter semester as well as semester 2. So we've double taught a number of subjects so that students, if they weren't on placement, were able to be getting coursework done, and then hopefully we'll flip that. The reality is similar to education. We've prioritised second year students because they're closest to graduation, and we've been really clear about that. We're hopeful that we will actually graduate all of our current, because it's a master's course, all of our second year students. But the reality of that is that next year we will be doing an enormous number of first year placements. So we would usually place about sort of 200, 220 students in a year. We'll have more than that in first placements next year. So I guess in terms of thinking about what the challenges are, that's a really a clear one.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to say, because University of Melbourne is one university with placement sort of commitment. So imagine next year, 2021, is going to be a big year for most institutions and students. So I think that's something mindful we need to think about too. But yeah, I really appreciate the comments. I've got a lot of these questions. We probably won't have time to get to all of them, but if it's okay, I might email them out to the panelists, and if they want to just write back, and we can place the answers to the questions on the recording when we put it up. We can have it part of the statement with the recording. So students, if you didn't get a chance to get to your questions, we will get to them. I'm just mindful of everyone's time today. I might switch into engineering and IT. Now, a lot of the questions here, you said before that your virtual scene hasn't changed too much, because a lot of your cohort are actually are used to being online in the virtual sense, and a lot of the organisations you link in with industry are definitely have adapted well to this type of environment. So, I mean, how does this fare with your students? So, basically. What other challenges, or if there's any now for semester 2 for you? I mean, what are your comments, Louise and Tracy there?
Well, I will say that when you say that our students and companies that we work with are used to operating online, that certainly wasn't the case prior to semester 1. So we moved everybody online in March, late March, and we hadn't had virtual or remote internships happening before for our engineering, IT, and information systems master's students. What I do think is easier is the fact that, particularly in those IT disciplines, those jobs can be done relatively easily remotely. In terms of semester 2, we're just wrapping up now our internships for semester 2. As I think Tracy touched on, our numbers are slightly down, but not dramatically so. I think for our students, and feel free to jump in, any engineering, IT, or information systems students that are online here today, certainly one of the challenges has been getting their heads around the idea that it's a different sort of internship. And we're really keen to stress to students that it's not a worse internship. It's not sort of a second best option, so to speak. It is, as David said, quite likely to be the future of work going forward, that a lot of people will be working remotely, and sort of this physical distance won't be as important as it might have been previously. So it's a different kind of internship. And I think maybe particularly initially as our students started applying for semester 2 internships, which would have happened a couple of months ago because we work a semester in advance. So during semester 1, our students apply for our semester 2 internships. I think initially we had some work to do to get that message out to students and to make sure that they were aware that this was an equally good option for them. But we're actually now, as we look to the beginning of semester 2, we're actually starting our planning for summer. So the way we work is we work a semester in advance. And so we're now sort of looking towards the challenges that we'll have in summer. The one that strikes me as one of the biggest possibly is the fact that a large number of our students undertake internships outside of Australia over summer. So that's something we're coming to terms with and setting up I guess a process for at the moment. I don't know, Tracy, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, yeah, just the international space will be a challenge, but yeah, we're working with government and our legal teams here at the university to get around those challenges.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Louisa and Tracy. Now, I might just quickly jump into MGSE now, and we do have a dedicated question for you guys. And if you have the time, we can are you able to address this one here? It's basically WAM changes. It wouldn't apply to first-year Masters of Teaching because we didn't have a previous WAM. How would MGSE cater to those students who receive good marks for their academic performance but lose marks due to disruption of placement, making teachers, mentors unable to mark objectively even with full days of placement? Any comments there, Daniela or Guinevere?
Can I just say, Genevieve will explain the WAM. I would hope that that all students are being marked fairly and objectively. So I think, you know, in terms of the question there, it is worrying that students feel that they are not being marked fairly or objectively. That's something certainly that we'll have some discussions about, and I'd like to know a little bit more about that if there are some particular concerns. But Genevieve perhaps will address the WAM for first years.
Yes, the WAM for first years, you're right. Those students won't already have a WAM calculated. That's the exclusion of marks from a WAM is more relevant to second year students or those who've already done 50 points. So whoever's put that question through is absolutely right. But, you know, I'd agree with Daniela. If there are concerns around fair marking, we'd probably be happy to hear about it. I know there's been talk among the academic staff who were supervising the students who did placement partly in schools and partly remotely just before mid-year, that the teaching staff there were very cognizant of the different arrangements that were in place for individual students. So some schools could not host a student on site, some could. There were all sorts of variations that we accommodated. And I just really encourage students to contact their teaching staff member to talk about that if they've got any concerns.
Can I also add, for nationally, we have a final assessment that is mandated, and what we offer at Melbourne is the AFGT, that particular assessment there. So we had primary students that went in and did a remote placement. For primary schools, it's even more challenging because most of the work is being done asynchronously. So students, primary school children are receiving packs or information at the start of the week, and those children are moving through that work with parents and carers. And so teaching in that space is very, very different. We still managed, we did communicate with those students and offered them the opportunity to stop placement if they didn't feel that they could adequately address that final high stakes assessment. They said that they could, and they continued. So, you know, this is something that we are very mindful of, and we are talking to students to make sure that they can do, you know, whatever they need to meet those assessment benchmarks, you know, satisfactorily. So again, as Genevieve said, we really encourage you. We really do spend a great deal on making sure that our students are well supported. We have clinical teaching specialists, we have clinical teaching coordinators. All of those people are the go-to people if there are concerns. So we really encourage our students to do that as much as possible.
Great, thank you. And I know we're almost there, so if you have time to stay on a couple of minutes would be great. If you have to go, I totally understand that this is Zoom live. We all have meetings back to back. So if you must disappear, thank you for your time. But I'm going to throw to David really quickly, if you've got the time, David, about those couple of questions around what do you foresee any challenges for semester 2 or forward? And I mean, for those students who are there any opportunities for resources or support for those students who need to be in a virtual internship at the moment?
So we're starting to, since semester 1 is wrapped up, students are starting to inquire more around semester 2 because they're self-sourced. They're starting to ask more questions, coming back with some of the challenges. And I think one of the, in addition to, as I mentioned before, laboratories, field work, and those access to facilities is still an ongoing challenge. We've had a couple of hosts come back to say that just with the current scenario in Melbourne, not really knowing what the future looks like, they're kind of contracting and focusing just on their core business and kind of back to basics. And as a result of that, their HR teams are just saying, we can't support any additional staff right now, even a student coming on. And so we've had a couple of places that normally would be a host, but they're just like, we can't do it right now. Give us, hopefully by summer we can get some of our processes in place and we can be better equipped. But at the same time, there are places that are like, yeah, we have the capacity. And so, we had one company that just came and has brought in 4 interns for the next semester, for semester 2, which is great. So it's there's some wins out of it and some struggles out of it. And our numbers for semester 2 are going to be down a little bit too, which we anticipated for internships. Again, it's optional, but it's a great opportunity for students to get that industry contact. And that's what we found is one of the biggest struggles is their sourcing is how do I get those industry connections? And so we get a lot of emails regarding networking. And as far as resources, we have a Job Ready program that's available for faculty of science students. It's a 6-week workshop that really kind of touches on some of those soft skills regarding networking, CVs, things like that for students. As far as other resources and support, I know that the uni has a fund available if you need technology upgrades that you're impacted by COVID and you can't, your technology doesn't support online learning. There is some funds available from the uni for that if that's a struggle. I know that also Central Careers has a lot of resources available for some of those soft skills that you may not have been able to access. And then that I think is the key resources we have right now. We're exploring in semester 2 some new events and programs and panels to bring in talking about transferable skills. I think that's really important as the job market changes, and we've maybe you've been focused on this one little area of science that now there's not going to be jobs in it. And so kind of taking a step back and seeing it, well, I still have that ability to have scientific rigor and communications and exploration, discovery. I can apply it to several other things. We actually are having a CEO of a financial services company coming in who he himself is a chemistry major, but he loves talking to STEM, and he wants to bring in some of the STEM careers as opposed to just business careers. And so having those transferable skills and kind of take a step back and what actually can I bring to this is really kind of our focus for programming for the next semester.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, David. So there's some positives in that space too. So it's good to know. So
we're really trying to focus on what are the positives out of this. Yeah, it's not exciting, you know, like, yes, we're all kind of struggle with some challenges, but there really are some positives out of this. And that's what we're trying to really focus on.
Fantastic. Look, I'm going to close out the session. That's all right, because the timing's got away with us. Now, Will and Natasha, did you have any final comments to sort of add to the group before we wind this down? Okay, I'm guessing that's a no from those two. But look, any final comments from our panelists at all? Daniela and Guinevere, anything to close out from your area?
Not so much final comments, but just very happy to hear from any students who've got any concerns. They're very welcome to email me anytime or give me a phone call.
Sure, great. And do you mind if we put those details up with the recording later on the site? Is that all right?
That's fine. Yep, that's fine.
Fantastic. Thanks. Any other comments? Judy from social work, did you want to say anything there?
Look, I'd like to echo Genevieve's comment just then, that if there are any students who have concerns, it's important that we know that we really would welcome any thoughts or concerns or any solutions. We're open to looking at different ways of working as well, within the parameters of what the ASW has given us.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's probably one of the key messages coming through, is that we're all in this together. Solution building is one of the great ways we can sort of move forward together. Anything from engineering?
Just the same. I think obviously we do want to hear from any of our students who've got any feedback for us. We want to make sure that under the circumstances, you can have the best experience possible. And if there's something that we can be doing to improve that, of course, we want to know about it. I'd also like to say thank you to all the students, because I know this has been a horribly disruptive time for all of us, but you're all doing a really awesome job trying to get through your degrees, your studies, and your internships or placements during this time. It's it's not easy, and I think a big acknowledgement needs to go out to the students who are doing their best. I was on a Zoom actually for physio students because my son was volunteering as a participant, and I saw how hard they were working to assess a 3-year-old's motor skills over Zoom. It is not easy, and you're doing a great job.
Great. Thanks. Tracy, did you want to say anything before we close it out?
No, just echoing Louise's sentiments, and big thank you to all the students, and hang in there. We're in it together, and we're here to offer any support that you need.
Great, thank you. And David, can I ask for any final comments from you?
Yeah, just kind of echoing, definitely for the students, we know this is challenging. Give yourself a little pat on the back, because you are doing a really great job. It's new for everyone. We're all making this up. We're doing the best we can, I feel like. Sometimes the decisions may not seem right, and that's okay. Like, ask us, help us understand that decision. We need the voice of the customer, and so please do ask those questions. And every situation is individual. We try to make, as much as we can, scalable decisions, but if it's not working for you, please let us know, because we all are challenged individually right now, and that's okay. Let those voices be heard. It truly is a time to ask for help, and let us know who we're missing when we make these decisions.
Amazing. Look, thank you so much for everyone's comments and time today. I really appreciate the students. Thanks again for being on the call. I think one of the key messages here is that the group of the staff members from faculties are doing the best they can with what they have in the situation. I think one of the clear messages is clear communication between the students and the staff. Is it's hard to create solutions if you don't really know what some of the concerns are. And so I think if we keep that channel open, I think we can get there. And I think it's a constantly moving goalpost in this situation. So I think it's trying to stay as positive we can be in this environment to support the students is everyone's goal, I think, in the room. So on behalf of GSA, we want to thank everyone for their time today. We will release this recording out hopefully by the end of the day, and we'll have some contact details attached to the recording, as well as I'll send these questions out to the panelists, and if they've got time just to reply with some general comments there, so we can affix that to the same page, and we'll share this this through all our networks. But this is one of hopefully a couple of sessions that we can start introducing the faculty, staff members to the cohorts to understand what's really going on behind the scenes. That it's not just the emails they get, it's actual people trying to pull together to make this work for everyone. So again, on behalf of GSA, thank you for your time today, guys, and stay safe.